Get ready for your weekly dose of pixie dust with Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli, and on today's show, I have special guest Margaret Kerry, who was the reference model for Tinkerbell for the 1953 classic animated feature Peter Pan. Listen as Margaret shares stories of her experiences with Tinkerbell, a character that has stayed with her to this very day. But before Tinkerbell came into her life, she had already been a part of show business, starting from a very young age. I hope you enjoy this exclusive Disney Coast to Coast interview with Margaret Kerry. Okay, well, Margaret, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm excited to have you here. And, I read your book, thick book.
Yes.
A lot of information. You've been in this industry for such a long time. And I have to laugh at the irony of the fact that, of course, you're known as the model for Tinkerbell, but your first role as a child was as a fairy.
I was. Isn't that amazing? I always say that I caused the Great Depression. I was born in 1929, and everything went right downhill from there. So my new parents, I was adopted when I was 3.5, and they said, she's cute, put her to work. And they were very sweet about it. They were wonderful people. But the first thing I did was Midsummer Night's Dream, and I got to wear my own costume. I got a taste of having my name written in the costume, and I was enamored of showbiz right then and there.
Nice. And before we get to the Disney stuff, you also had, I just think this is such a cool credit, Our Gang, which later became the Little Rascals.
Yes.
I mean, you were part of the Little Rascals.
I'm told that there's only 4 of us left.
Wow.
But boy, did we give them a run for their money, didn't we?
Yeah. I don't even know. Do you know the story of how and or why the name changed from Our Gang to the Little Rascals?
Well, actually, I'm told that the announcement that they had, the voiceover, when it came up on the screen that the Little Rascals were coming on, and they used both names.
Oh, okay.
But it was supposed to be Our Gang. But people seemed to like the Little Rascals better, and so they got used to it being called both of them, and still to this day, you could say one or t'other, and they know what you're talking about.
That's great.
But we were Little Rascals. But they hired kids or cast kids at that time. You were 4 and 5 and 6 years old, going on 32. You were supposed to be very mature, very grown up. You never acted like a child. It was surreal. It wasn't bad. It was just looking back on it, you go, wow, you stood there in line, you never spoke up differently. And to make matters worse, the assistant director, whose name was Gordon Douglas, couldn't remember my name, so he kept calling me Kathleen because he knew I was Irish. The whole thing is delightfully surreal.
Yeah. And for you as a kid, I believe the thing that most interested you was dance, right? That's really where you got most of your training.
Because it was the Little Rascals that stopped me from ever singing. Darla Hood, who had the best voice of any child singer that I have ever, better than Judy Garland.
Wow, that's a statement.
She stepped out on the stage, and for some reason, they were going to shoot this. We were doing Broadway melody or something, and she belted out a song, and I thought, I can never do that. And my vocal cords for singing stopped right then and there. So I went to dancing. I was a solo dancer, and a very good one, and in fact, I'm still dancing on stage.
Wow.
I'm headed up to Mount Airy this weekend, or next weekend, I guess, to do Mayberry Days. That's Andy Griffith's hometown. Mm-hmm. And we changed it into Mayberry. And the main street is like Mayberry. We have Floyd's barbershop there. It's there all year round. Mm-hmm. We have the theaters and et cetera. On Colonel Tim's talent show, I tap dance at the end of my 15 minutes. And they all So it's like people used to look at me as a little kid being able to tap dance and say, "Isn't she amazing for her age?" And now they look at me after I finish and say, "Isn't she amazing for her age?"
That's great. And we should mention you were on the Andy Griffith Show, which is why you're part of the celebration.
Yes, I was on 2 of them. Bless them, bless them, bless them. Those wonderful. We have about 160,000 fans across the country. They're on 3 stations besides, what's that YouTube thing? YouTube,
Yeah.
It's on there, and they have followers, they have club meetings, and the interesting part about it, most of us who were on the Andy Griffith Show live out here.
Yeah.
On the West Coast, but we don't have a rewatchers club out here. Is that not weird?
Oh, come on, that's your next project.
I know.
You gotta start that. Let's jump to your work for Disney. Of course, this was numerous years later. I love how this all started because the irony, once again, you got the call about Disney while you were working on the Fox lot.
After I had been working on the Almost Broadcasting company.
Oh, ABC, yes.
Because I did 172 shows with Charlie Ruggles, and those were networks. So we had to do 2 of those to send them off, to the East Coast and then the West Coast. So I was working there. They had me doing another show with Peter Marshall. And from that, the choreographer from that show asked me to come over to Paramount and be to Fox and be an assistant dance director on a big musical. So I'm dancing away, having a good time. June Haver was there. Gloria DeHaven was there. All the rest was going well. And I get this call from my agent who said, "Can you get the day off tomorrow? Because they are interviewing for a dancer, a pantomimist, and an actress, they called them then. Thank heavens, some people still do. Actress for a 3.5-inch sprite who doesn't talk." Mm. And Jeff, I said, "Well, I'm working here and I really don't want to make waves and so on." She said, "It's for Disney." I said, "I'll be there." 6:00 in the morning, I will be there. And sure enough, over I went. The next morning, after I had done some choreography to a little 45 record that I had with some music of about a 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy fixing breakfast, looking into the refrigerator and so on and so forth. And I can't tell you the thrill, because everybody that I knew working in the movies to work at Disney's was the greatest thrill that they could think of.
Was that your first Disney audition? You'd obviously auditioned a lot.
That was it.
So that was your first Disney audition and you got the part?
Well, I got the part and I was so excited. I got lost when I got on the... But I found it, and I did the scene. They asked me to do the scene where I was stepping on a mirror. You remember the nursery scene?
Yeah.
And I played her. I want to tell everybody. Now, this is back in 68 years ago, when they didn't all think of everybody's in love. I never thought of her being beyond 9 years of age. And she's looking at herself, and she's never seen herself in a mirror before. Mm. So she's looking at herself that way. Not that I'm gorgeous,
Yeah.
And so they said either then, Marc Davis said either then or next week, he said, "Would it be convenient for you to come to work next week?" Which is a piece of information that maybe people don't know about. This was the time when television was coming on, and I was working on television, or whether the TV was going to be the big thing or whether movies were going to be the big thing. And they hated each other, and none of us knew. So I was working on my own television show on Channel 13 locally. I was doing the ABC network show. I was also doing radio. So what they knew was all of us had other jobs that we were doing. So Marc Davis, the great animator who designed Tinkerbell, said, "Let me know what your schedule is and when it's convenient for you to come." Well, I'd never heard that word before. I thought I was special. But everybody was doing that, and they would set up the schedule so we could come over when we had a free day.
Now, I have a pretty naive question for you, but I'm
good at answering them.
I'm very curious, though. So when you get this call, you knew you were going in for Peter Pan, yes? Or no, you didn't know it was Peter Pan.
Just a sprite.
Okay.
That didn't talk.
So once you found out it was Peter Pan, I am curious, because I'm I grew up in an age where Peter Pan, I think 99% of people, when you hear Peter Pan, the first thing you think of is the Walt Disney animated feature.
Yes.
Did you know the story of Peter Pan when you found, was it that publicly? I know probably in England more known, but I don't know. Was Peter Pan known?
No, I don't believe it was. So it could be shuttled to this side of entertainment or shuttled to that side. I think that they did a lot more of Captain Hook that was in the book. But I went to a school where they actually had us read the unabridged.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so I knew about her, and you sort of got the idea that she was about 9 years old, and she was just ready for adventure, kind of thing. However, I think they brought so much of that in. There was a book that was done right after we finished the movie, or it was presented, I shouldn't say right after, but very closely, from an English lady who was quite well known, and it was The Dove. And she had written this backstory. And she had Tinkerbell breaking her leg.
Oh.
She had this mother dove that sat there and did all of the... It was so dark from anything that Disney did. And I went back and read other stories that Disney did and realized that these stories from Europe, very dark.
Yeah.
For example, there's one where two naughty ladies who were just nice, they had their eyes pecked out by birds.
Yes, yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to say, what?
Yeah.
But Disney was so able to take them and turn them into this joyous, exciting, except the witch. I have to tell you, when I first saw Snow White, that witch scared me.
I love it. As you mentioned, you auditioned or interviewed with Marc Davis. Of course, he's one of Walt's 9 old men. He created Maleficent, Cruella, Tinkerbell, of course.
And Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Jungle Cruise.
And the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, he worked on a lot.
What a wonderful man. He also designed Mrs. Darling, and he also designed the redheaded mermaid, because I am
You're the redheaded mermaid. Yeah, now, were you familiar with his work before you met with him?
I didn't know anything about anybody.
Yeah.
I just knew it was Disney's.
Okay. So when you met with Marc, how exactly did he describe the job to you? Because you're the reference model, not a rotoscope model, which is a different thing.
Yes. I didn't know that for years. Mrs. Davis, Alice, told me it wasn't rotoscoping. I had been telling people for years that that's what it was.
Because rotoscoping's more when they would film you and then trace the animation.
Yes.
But you were actually a reference model where
they did it freehand.
Yeah.
How did he approach it? Well, he approached it because all over the walls of this little office on the 3rd floor, that was quite crowded, by the way, which surprised me, was covered by pieces of paper of this adorable, enchanting little character. Well, I looked at it and knew that, and some of them said Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
So that's when I walked in that I realized, but he had her in all different looks, and I realized that she's supposed to be quirky, so he didn't really have to say much. He had drawn it all.
Okay.
I remember one time we were on the set, and he said, I want her to be grumpy. And I said, Mr. Davis, that's how long ago it was, you used Mr. I said, Mr. Davis, how grumpy? And that genius took a piece of paper, sketched her face in, I would say, 45 seconds, turned it around, there was Tinkerbell looking grumpy.
Huh.
I thought, this man is a genius, and he was such a gentle man.
Yeah.
He would not allow any 4-letter words on the stage, anything. I talked to Catherine Beaumont, and I said, Catherine, did you ever feel uncomfortable? Never. Always protected. And you don't know how we loved that, because things were happening in the movie business that are now coming out.
Sure.
Of what we were facing.
Yeah.
So to go over there, and you had this feeling that you were safe.
And you especially were like in a bathing suit.
Yeah, walking, and I had to cover up all the time. You never walked around in just a bathing suit.
Yeah.
It's on the cover of my book, as you know, and Howard Green, who has been at Disney.
Oh, I love Howard.
125 years, I accuse him of. He saw that picture of me, and he said, that's got to go on the cover. And then there's a shadow of Tinkerbell behind me.
Yeah.
But that was my costume. And some people still say to me today, do you still have that bathing suit? No, but I still have the ballet slippers.
Oh, wow.
I never threw them away. I don't know why. I'm frugal. I was born in the Great Depression, you know.
And now you're clearing house.
Yes.
So you mentioned Marc had all these sketches up, and obviously he was still working things out. Do you remember seeing any sketches that really ended up being what we know Tinkerbell as, or were they considerably different? Do you feel like there were any facial features of yours that maybe ended up in Tinkerbell?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
But everything was so subtle. I was very close to her.
Sure.
My body size, I'm rounded. I'm not the tall, slim model type. Anyway, so that worked for them. My legs were our short legs. That worked for them. I have a small mouth, so everything was sort of there. And then they knew that I was perky and could answer back, and it was lovely when they said, is it convenient for you to come to work next week? I went over 9 months, off and on.
Wow.
Because they were getting to the next sketch. Jerry Geronimi came down to see me do the pantomime that I did on the mirror, and that's when they both decided.
Now, who's that? You did that at the audition or meeting, that
That's
pantomime.
up
Was that
in
your
the
idea?
office.
Yeah, was that your idea?
No, they said
or-
that's the first scene that we were going to do.
Okay.
I had passed the first test.
With the record.
With the record.
Okay, so how did the record thing happen? Was that your idea, or did they tell you
No,
to come
that was
prepared?
oh no, I had been in show business since I'm 4.
Yeah.
I know you don't walk in and say, hi, hire me.
Okay, so you
know,
brought
if
a
you
record
could bring
player.
something.
Wow.
And it was a 45 record, and I did this. The pantomime wasn't that great. He's fixing breakfast, he drops the egg and wants to scoop it under the sink so nobody notices and dashes off.
Yeah.
And so I had passed that one. And then, so I said, he said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to bring down somebody. And he brought down Jerry Geronimi, who was one of the Uber directors, Winifred Jackson. Those two came down to have their picture taken with me. That's why it's in my book, the pictures with. But there's no picture of me with Marc Davis. You can't find pictures with Marc Davis. When I went through Bless Their Hearts, Disney said, sure, come on over to Photo Archives and get what you want.
Yeah.
And Ed Squire was just wonderful. And I went through it, and to find, they keep using the same ones over and over, and it drove Alice crazy. Because he was always in the background. He didn't want to push ahead. That isn't who he was. And when they did the museum piece up in for San Francisco,
the Walt Disney
Family Museum,
Yeah.
and they gave a salute to all of those 9 old men. Believe it or not, Marc Davis's salute was in the hallway where there was hardly any light. I thought he would have loved that.
That's so funny. So you start going with doing these pantomimes for Marc Davis, but I'm curious, like when you finally got on stage working with him, what kind of director was he? Did he kind of just let you do your thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I stepped out. I remember these are not quite
Not
the
that he was
words.
the director of the film, but I
No,
use the
but
term
he was the
director, and he was
of
directing
the
you.
scene.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Because he had drawn it. It was his idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, I stepped out in front, and these were the words. They're close. Mr. Davis? And he says, yes, Margaret. And I said, what do you want her to be? Do you want to be ditzy like Petty Boop? Or do you want her to be above it all like Queen of the Fairies? And he said very quietly, Margaret, we want her to be you. And I said, golly gee, I think I can do that.
Golly gee.
I still use it. But the whole idea was he would show me what she's doing.
Yeah.
Often they would have marks, or they would have props.
Yeah, giant.
For me.
I've seen the photos with you and the giant scissors when she's
Yes.
stuck on the drawer.
And so I'd say, okay, and I would do something, and he would usually go, I like it. Let's do it again. We would rehearse it, and he'd say, hit that mark over there. He would talk to Jerry Geronimi. They would talk about it. Yep, they both like it. Seldom ever was I told to do anything different. One of the biggest things I think that they really, really liked was the fact that I am a dancer. And if you go back and look at the movie, you will find that Tinkerbell has the walk of a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
She rolls her feet. She walks quickly. Her hands are always as if she's doing a ballet pose. So that's how I did everything, which set her apart from any other type of a character. She never walks hard. If she does, it's like a ballet dancer walking hard. And interestingly enough, I'm much more of a tap dancer than I am a ballet dancer. I worked with Nico Charisse and Sid Charisse for years over at their dance school. And so that's the only ballet that I really got. But that's the way I played her all the way through. And then I'm a pretty good actress. So all of that came together. And he would show me what they had sketched. And I said, let's try it. And so I would go out and he'd say, all right, let's try it. And they would roll it and away we'd go. And he'd say, everything good for everybody? And they would say, yes. He says, okay, let's take 2 for protection. And I'd do it again. And he'd say, you're amazing. You actually do exactly the same thing the next time.
Yeah.
I said, do you want me to do something? No.
That's the dancer training coming through, right? Yeah.
And the training when you are 4 years old. And you have to have a close-up doing exactly what you did in the long shot.
Yeah.
I've been disciplined all my life and love it.
Yeah.
I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. It was great.
How'd you like working with those giant props and stuff? Like, would you show up, you walk into the stage, there's giant scissors, you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're doing today.
Right, except the scissors were something else because I was supposed to pull against them, but they made it out of, what is that kind of board that you have for games? And you can carve it, but it's very, very, very light. And that's what they made it out of.
Cheap Disney.
At the very top, the top of the scissors would bend. So I'm supposed to be pulling against that, and I'm digging my heels in, and the prop man had a rope around the scissors, and it really wasn't working that well. So one of the times he put the rope around me and around him, and he's standing up, and I'm pulling, and his rope lets go, and he goes twirling past me out onto the set, and ends up in a heap. Well, of course, he pulls me along. I end up in a heap. We're laughing because nobody's hurt. It's just funny. And Jerry Geronimi got up and he says, here, let me help you. And, of course, he falls over. And we beg the cameraman, please, can we have a clip of that film? He said, you were out of the light. We didn't get it.
Oh, no. I hope you got stunt pay for that day. Now, of course, you were working on this film, you said over like a gap of 9 months or so, right? Yes. How many days have you had to guess do you think you actually worked?
I have no idea.
Was it pretty frequent-ish between the 9 months, or just like once every couple of weeks you'd come in?
I would say 2 days every couple of weeks, something like that. And then it was the same thing for the other character that I did.
The mermaid.
The mermaid.
Yeah.
But we worked on that about 3 days in a row. But of course, the week before we were in doing the voices.
Yes. So for the redheaded mermaid in Peter Pan, you were not only the reference model for that, but you're also the voice of it.
And that changed my whole career.
And you worked with one of the best in voiceover, Miss June Foray, the late great June Foray, who most people know as Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle, but for Disney, she did Mulan, DuckTales, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
And tell her who she was in Mulan.
Mulan, the grandmother.
I know, my favorite character. Yeah. I would see June over at a Sifa or something, tease her unmercifully. And I said, how come you didn't have an Asian accent? You're the only one in the whole movie that didn't have an Asian accent. And one time she came back and she says, well, Bobby Driscoll didn't have an English accent in Peter Pan. He's the only one. I've mentioned that to people and they never noticed.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. But
great.
After we finished, of course, we've jumped over to the Redheaded Mermaid. I think you have more questions about Tinkerbell, right?
Well, of course, but we can go back and forth.
Okay, it's all right. So when Marc Davis, I had gotten him 2 people to be
more reference models.
live action reference model, because here we are up against schedules again. Hans Conried couldn't come in to do the captain. So I told him Henry Brandon could do it, because I had just done a movie with Henry Brandon called Canyon City. And this man could do anything also, kind of thing. And the other one was the best dancer I've ever danced with, who was the other assistant dance director at Fox, and that was Roland Dupre. But Roland only grew to be 5'8". So you really can't be a real male dancer of that unless you go. So he became a choreographer.
Okay.
So I said, and he will look good in green tights. Roland never forgot that I told him he looked good in green tights. So I'm over, and he says, "How would you like to be the character for the redheaded mermaid?" And I said, "Yes." He said,
Before Ariel. Long before Ariel.
We've all agreed that she's the great grandmother of Ariel.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Yes.
I'll take that as canon. I like it.
So we're called over to the sound department to do the lines for the mermaids, and I can't remember which line I got. It was either, "Oh, Peter, we're so happy to see you," or whether, "We just wanted to drown her." But one or the other, I got and she got the other one. And they had us squirming around on rocks. There's pictures of it in my book, and they lashed our ankles together. So I didn't remember that, but June did, when I saw her years later. So we step outside. The sun is still shining. It's about 4 o'clock. We went in about 1 o'clock. And Connie Hilton and June and I look at each other and, why are we looking for more work in front of the camera? This is stupid.
Voiceover.
You don't have to put a makeup on. You don't have to do your hair. You don't have to wear a costume. You don't have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. So June was already a lot on radio, but I had been with June. We're both short. June was about 2 or 3 inches shorter than I. So we looked right across at this little microphone. I didn't do as much radio work as she did. Oh, she was so sensational. Anyway, so I went off in that direction. But later on, when I would see her at events or over at her house or something, and she had done Mulan, and I teased her about that I loved her grandmother. That was one of the best things she ever did. And I said, she says, "Yeah, which line did you?" Betty, you should have brought back a man. And she said, "I knew it. You were my competition." And,
of course, talking about Peter Pan, we got to talk about the time that you meet, or the times you meet Walt Disney. You're working on the Walt Disney Studios lot. The boss is around. He comes into the stage where you're working.
several times.
Several times. I mean... What was he? What you expected in the sense of? I mean, at that point, actually, he wasn't on TV at that point so much. So he wasn't like the persona yet.
Well,
he was famous, but he wasn't like in people's weekly homes.
And they would talk about him, and of course, everybody in the business was talking about him. So I'm on stage one, and if you'll see in the pictures, there are 160 pictures in my book.
I noticed there are a lot.
Neat?
Yeah,
isn't that neat? Thank you, Disney, and thank you for a lot of other people. But anyway, I have the center stage, and I want to assure people that there was a crew of about 10 men there. There were no women on the crew at that time. And there's a 35 millimeter camera all set up, all the lights. We had lights up in the catwalk. We had everything. And there was a great big huge cyc in blue, like a big piece of canvas that was stretched so you could see the outline of my body as I moved and did all of so the artist could capture that.
So that was blue back then as well?
It was blue.
That's interesting, because blue screen and green screen, of course, still used today to pull things out and put in digital.
Well, they didn't do it because of that. It was because it was light blue and it shone against...
Yeah, you could see your silhouette nicely. Yeah.
So... Anyway, I'm over there because Tinkerbell did not speak. We did not have a playback. See, usually if you were doing this kind of work, you had to match the track that you had already recorded and do the business at the same time. But we think of a sound stage, and the great big huge doors that they open to let trucks in. We left that open so that the sunshine would come in. Well, one day I'm doing whatever, and I look over, and there's a group of men, shadows only. But Buddy Ebsen was leading them. You could not miss his walk. You could not miss Buddy Ebsen. There was just no question about it. And in they came, and they went over against the wall. I would say it was about 40 feet away, and they had these little risers, 2 of them. And behind that, and there's a picture in the book of that, too. Somebody found it for me, bless them. there were registration sheets behind, and I figured they were trying to figure out how to register an animated character with the human character. So they're all standing around talking about this, and Buddy Epson is doing whatever. And then several times they would all leave, and Walt Disney would come over and talk to Marc Davis and to the cameraman, whose name I never did learn. I was always sad that I never knew it, because he was so sweet. Anyway, and they would call me over. Now Walt Disney wouldn't know me from Adam. He was looking over the scenes. I did a couple of things for him, not big things, and he was just chatting, and he was very handsome, very slim. And let me go back a little bit. If you had been in the business as I was since you were 4, it was drilled into you that the head of a studio was God, G-A-W-D, God. And if you saw him, you would curtsy, but you would never see him.
Sure.
You would never, ever see him. And so that's what I was brought up on. And I was brought up into the circle. I thought, he's the head of the studio. I've never seen the head of a studio before. And I was awestruck. And I made sure that I was polite and very schoolgirlish. And he was polite, and they chatted for a few minutes, and when he left. So I think it was about the second or third time that he did the same thing. He came over. Suddenly I went, wait a minute, he's Walt Disney. And then I made sure that I never called him by name, because I didn't want to say Mr. Disney. That sounded just not right. I was about 18, I was a little past that, maybe not. So that was one thing, as I'm walking up and putting on my cover-up, because I would never walk up to him in a one-piece bathing suit like that. And walked up, and, we talked. And the last time I had told, Jerry Geronimi, who was so easy to talk to, that I went to school with his daughters, Walt Disney's daughters, Sharon and Diane.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Walt Disney said to me, I understand that you went to school with my daughters. I was, well, you can imagine, I was dumbstruck. And so I said something clever. I said, yes, I did. Diane was in the upper level, and Sharon was the lower level, or vice versa. I don't remember which. And that cut off that conversation in a hurry. But the question is that people ask me, and they said, well, why didn't he go to his own soundstage? And I said, and I make a point that we were on Soundstage 1. I do it for a reason, because if they ask me, I said, because back then they only had one soundstage.
Yeah.
They went, really? That never occurred to people.
Which is why also you mentioned they were doing other work in there with Buddy Epson. It was like there were multiple things.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, and
that's what I meant.
There's no sound wasn't an issue, at that point.
So they could do it at any time. And they weren't filming. They were just talking. So that turned out to be, and I think I was told by Rick Law or someone, bless him, that it was the beginning of the Little Man.
Oh, yeah, the animatronic figure.
That was it.
Yep. Yeah,
And
I've seen
I saw
photos
that.
of it. Yeah, and so you were there.
I was there.
Tinkerbell. It's crazy. I am curious, because actually I don't think I've seen photos of this, but did they fly you?
No.
You never flew?
No, they flew. I talked to Catherine about that one time, and she said, thank heavens that Roland Dupre was there doing Peter Pan, because she was terrified. She's terrified of heights. And they put them in this rickety basket. At least it looked rickety to me. And there was a pulley up above, and this man would pull it up and down and push them so they could fly back and forth. But she said, Roland said, we're going to go 1 foot off the ground, and then we'll go back down. And he worked with her. And she said, he's the one who got me to the place where I could fly in that. And remember, they had to match the soundtrack.
Sure.
And there were kids behind them. So they told me one day I was going to fly and I didn't want to.
Oh no.
Oh, but you don't do that, if you're told so. Oh, yes, of course. Well, they came back after lunch and they said, gee, Margaret, we figured out at lunch it's not going to do us much good, because Tinkerbell does not fly. Tinkerbell darts. So that won't really help us. So I guess you're not going to fly. And I said, oh, gosh, golly, gee.
That's great. I love that.
But I never got into it. But I love them talking about it over how she did this and how, because if I may, I'm going to give you a piece next. I did not bring the book with me, so I'm doing this by memory. And I will do it in a dialect. But this is the only description that we know that James M. Barrie ever gave of Tinkerbell. This is all that Marc Davis had to go on, if you can imagine that, because she'd never been seen before. And this, you remember the nursery scene?
Of course.
And I hope I do it, but it's from memory, folks, so stick with me. Anyway. The little night lights in the nursery were burning brightly as Mr. and Mrs. Darling went out to the party. But suddenly, in the room, there was another light, brighter than the night light, just zipping about, going in and out of every pocket and every closet and every drawer in the room to find Peter Pan's shadow. But when it stopped, you could see that it was not a light. It was a fairy, no bigger than your hand and still growing. It was a girl named Tinkerbell. She was dressed in a skeletal leaf cut low and square, which showed her figure off to best advantage. That was it.
Bravo. Applause for that performance. I love that.
But it's fun to know that this genius...
Yeah. Yeah, because Tinkerbell was a light at that point. Yeah.
Because how did you do fairies before Tinkerbell?
Yeah.
They were streamlined. They had, wings that flowed behind them. And no, he went the other way. The man was just a genius.
and, obviously a really sweet, kind man, it sounded like as well, because something happened to you that I was shocked to read this. You were invited to view the first pencil tests of Tinkerbell. That is not common. That is not something where, studios usually invite the actor to see test footage or whatever.
Yes.
So, that's incredible that Marc invited you to that. And then also on top of that, I believe Walt was in the room as well.
Yes. As I remember it, I got all duded up, as they used to say, with mascara, which I hardly ever use. And I go up on the third floor to the projection room, and they had taken the little sketch, which is also in my book, of the line drawings of her sitting in Peter's hat, and she's very angry. Mm-hmm. She has been caught, and he's going to use her pixie dust to spray the children so they can fly. And I was about, I would guess, 8 seconds long, and it was a pencil test. And so I'm sitting there in the place, and I don't know, this is new to me. I had never been invited to this before, and I'm hearing people arguing whether she's going to work. And I wanted to punch him out. I knew that it was going to work. Because,
you were already defensive of
Oh, my, but I didn't know what to say to them. And then I hear a door open, and people were leaning against the wall at this point. Everybody wanted to see it. And the door opened, and I hear this voice say behind me up the aisle, said, "Here, Walt, take my chair, take my seat." And this voice that we all got so used to, says, "No, I'm fine here." So evidently he leaned against the wall, and I'm sitting there thinking, the head of the studio. I have been at studios before where they had ribbons across the chairs, and if you went near it, you would get fired. Yeah. It was so different. And here I didn't look back, but obviously he was leaning against the wall, watching this. It was wonderful. So I'm watching this, and I see her come to life, and I think in the chapter I wrote that my mascara undid me because I was crying, and everybody was crowding around Marc as I left, and I didn't stop because I could see the black on my cheeks as I went, but I felt very special. Yeah. I really did.
That's incredible. And obviously being on a studio lot is a magical place, and you saw some things that at the time you probably didn't know what they were, but you saw the robotic alligators being created for the Jungle Cruise.
On the way, right? It was out in the unincorporated area that they hadn't built anything on yet at the studio. The Disney lot is a very tiny lot.
Yeah, it is.
We don't think of it but I was used to working at Fox that went on forever, or MGM, which you got lost. I knew my mother was going to forget which soundstage we were on. I knew it because the tram at MGM would pick you up to go to the commissary to have lunch.
Yeah.
And if she didn't know the number, as a kid, that panicked me. You didn't worry about that on the Disney lot.
Yeah.
You walked over. And so I'm walking by, and they have this, I would say, 12-foot alligator in certain pieces that they were working. And is it good to say articulating?
Yeah, an articulated figure, sure.
That they were working back and forth on the ground. And I'm going, say, what is that? And I didn't know that they were working at the Hyperion place at that time.
Yeah.
On what they were doing. But I saw those before they went into the...
That's crazy.
Wonderful.
That's wild. I am curious, these days when you see Tinkerbell fly, above Sleeping Beauty Castle or Cinderella Castle, what kind of feelings do you get? And I think for your 95th birthday, we should get you to do that.
Well, I will tell you, when I see her, and I'm not joking, this flashes through my mind. It's thank you, Lord, in heaven above, that I was not cast as the woman who had her throat slit in Psycho.
That's your... Wait a second.
Is that not right?
That's amazing. That is your thought when you see Tinkerbell fly.
Yes, I'm just so thankful because she's so wonderful and can do so much and has done so much. You said you read the book.
Yeah.
Did you read the chapter?
Cover to cover.
Did you read? I'm sure then you did the lady who came up to me and said Tinkerbell, and you saved my life.
With the tattoo, yes.
She's one of 4 that have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And Tinkerbell gives so much love out, which is, and even the 7 pictures that they did afterwards with all the fairies.
Yeah.
They taught lessons.
How do you feel about her having a voice? Of course, Mae Whitman is the voice of Tinkerbell in those newer
At first
films.
they didn't. They had another voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went over. They wanted me to do some posing for them. They were just starting.
Wait a second, really?
Yeah.
You went back, what was this, probably early?
I just went over to where they were drawing the picture and the animators were, and they wanted to know whether Peggy Holmes was there and whether I liked the storyline. I loved the storyline, and unfortunately, that storyline they didn't use. It was the wonderful one about the tree. But my point was that they showed me about, I guess 4 minutes of what they had, and how did I like Tinkerbell. And of course, I didn't because they took all of her curves off, but it was pre-Peter Pan. It really was. And they changed that later. They fixed that. So the next time I hear it, they've got Mae.
They get Mae in it. Interesting. And you like her with a voice?
Oh, I thought she was adorable.
Cool.
And she was so excited to do it.
Yeah.
She has the excitement that Tinkerbell does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the incredible things that ended up happening because, Tinkerbell and Disneyland, and I love this story. So the Disneyland TV show's coming around, and Disneyland, the park, is being created, and Roy Disney, Walt's brother, is worried about using Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and these classic characters.
But he's not.
Walt isn't, because Walt knows, but Roy, it's...
No.
No?
Well, you're close.
Okay. Correct me.
As I understand it, anyway, because people were there. I'm just telling you what they told me. No, Roy was asked to tell Walt that the heads of the departments and so on did not have that secure feeling about the park.
Sure.
And of course, I think everybody thought that Walt Disney was the president of it, and he wasn't. You had a board and a president and so on. And the story was told to me by several people that Roy went and said, they don't want you to use Clarabelle Cow, Horace Horsecollar, Mickey Mouse, and so on. And he said, one of them said, I think at that time they were going to go with Mickey's Village at that time.
Because their fear was that the park wouldn't be successful.
Right.
And then it would tarnish these characters.
Yes, exactly. And they couldn't license the characters again. How would you like to have been Walt Disney with Mickey's Village? You're putting your own money into everything.
Yeah.
And you don't have your characters. But it was told to me this way, that a few days later, he called Roy in. He said, let me give some thought to it. Called Roy in. He says, tell them I'm bringing back Tinkerbell and Jiminy Cricket. Now, that's odd, but when you think about it, it was also explained to me that he never did a sequel. He never did a sequel. He was so busy with new ideas and everything that he wanted to do and where he couldn't be bothered. So actually, Tinkerbell was on the shelf.
Yeah.
She was not going to be brought out again. She did the little commercials.
Yeah. And she's at the beginning of every episode. Yeah.
So it's my understanding that what happened was they needed $6 million more to complete whatever. It got bigger and bigger. And so they went to NBC. They said, will you be a partner with us? Come in with us, get shares or whatever they did business-wise, I don't know. And we will have an hour show from our vault and so on and so forth. NBC turned them down and CBS turned them down. And they went to the Almost Broadcasting Company. And they said yes. And so when they came on, and I know this is Walt Disney that did this, he said, why don't we have Tinkerbell fly into my office and I could talk with her? Now, let me go back on another portion of this story. Let me finish this, because when they opened up in 1955, none of these characters were seen. There was only Tinkerbell. I have signed more banners that were up on the castle of Tinkerbell. Wow. I have signed more posters, everything else with Tinkerbell. And I'm told that that's one of the reasons that they started with Peter Pan's Ride.
Oh, wow, okay.
And
interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
And Pinocchio.
Yeah.
What do they call that?
Well, Pinocchio came in the 80s, the ride.
But
Pinocchio's Daring Journey.
I don't know what it was, but Peter Pan's Ride was one of the first ones because it was Tinkerbell that was there. I was pregnant at the time, so I didn't go to the opening. But that gives you a little of where it was going.
But yeah, no, that's pretty incredible that, the character lived on because of that. Because Peter Pan was 53. Of course, the TV show Disneyland comes along in 54. The park opens in 55.
But the
rest
only
is history.
reason that they knew Tinkerbell was because of the TV show.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. How would they have known her? I mean, the picture was there, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
And most people don't remember they couldn't get a tape of it.
Yeah.
They couldn't replay it.
Yep.
I mean, once it was out of the theater, it was out of the theater.
Yeah.
So who remembered Tinkerbell? Maybe. But that's why I say when Walt Disney went on the air, and he had 80% of the viewers on television every Sunday.
That's crazy.
80%.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore.
That was amazing. But they got to know Tinkerbell with a wand in his office.
Is there a story behind that? Why does she have a wand?
I have no idea, except they thought maybe they could use it in the castle.
Okay.
I've never have heard why, but it made all the difference because very few people at that time could go to Disneyland. So they would know Tinkerbell. So how would Tinkerbell become? I'm told that she is recognized in Outer Mongolia. That's what an icon she is. Oh, side story. I was having lunch with Marc Davis years later at Club 33, of
Very
course.
Nice.
And Alice was right in between us. We were chatting across her, and she was chatting. And I finally I had the second cup of coffee. So I got bold, and I said, tell me, Mark. By that time, I called him Mark. Tell me, what got into you that you were going to design an iconic character that showed her underpants? And he laughed just like that, and he says, and Margaret, he said slowly, do you notice they are always clean? But she is.
Yeah. Yeah.
She is.
She's not wearing much.
It's like the Andy Griffith Show. When you point out that I'm one of only 7 married couples on the 8 years of that show. Nobody else in the show is married. And they go, that's right. It's the obvious.
It's the obvious things you don't always catch, yeah. Now, obviously, Tinkerbell has lived on for many years. Oh, actually, before we move on, I want to talk very briefly because your former husband was involved with the opening day broadcast of Disneyland, which, of course, there's a couple things I wanted to hear. So we've been talking about ABC a lot, the network ABC. You call it the Almost Broadcasting Company. Just to clarify for those listeners, she says that because it was such a, NBC and CBS.
It was the baby broadcasting.
Yeah.
And how it got started was we were overdoing the Ruggles show at the old Vitagraph studio. That's where they made the first sound movie with the jazz singer.
Yeah.
They were scraping bat guano off the floor as we were doing the show, if you can imagine. So that the crew was always wailing that they weren't working for a real network.
Okay.
And Mutual was not going to remain a network because there was a huge Mutual network radio that they thought was going to go in, evidently, to be a TV, but it didn't. That was Don Lee, you know, that on top of Griffith Park. That's where I used to go up and do TV shows when I was about 16 or 17.
Wow.
So they would say, well, I work for the Almost Broadcasting System. And we all just got so used to it. And, of course, it's a wonderful...
Disney owns it now. So you were working on an ABC show, the American Broadcasting Company, way back then. Now Disney owns that.
I did the first family show, network show that Disney ever did.
Yeah.
With the Charlie Ruggles show.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's crazy. In any case, your husband or former husband was working on the Disneyland opening
my first
day.
husband.
Your first husband.
Because I've lost him.
Yeah.
But
so what was he doing for the Dateline Disneyland special?
Well, he was an associate director and then moved up to do some of the directing because it was such
chaos.
Horrendous. So he got an idea that maybe he could go to work for Disney if he shot a documentary of this. He got an okay to do that, and the friend who actually did all the filming for the Clutch Cargo show that we did, 239 episodes, the photographer got an okay to go out and film all that was happening, and then we put it all together and made it into a documentary. And shall I tell my favorite story of that?
Go right ahead.
Okay. After it was edited in, they gave it to me to do the narration. I did not read the narration. Hal Smith from the Andy Griffith Show. It's a small
little
family
community. Yeah.
Did the narration, and so I'm about to deliver my child, and I told my husband Dick Brown. I said, "You call your mom and say she has to come and look after our son." And because I gotta go. He says, you can't. He says, you can't. He says, I have a meeting with Walt Disney and the crew tonight for them to see this documentary. You know, it's very, very important. And I loved it because he said, Walt Disney's name, like it would stop the labor pains.
Listen, if there's a good reason to miss your child's birth,
so anyways, he says, no, I can't do it. And so anyway, being the wonderful wife that I was, incredible, I said to him, I finally let him off the hook. I said, well, you can't do much about anything to start with, so why don't you drop me off at the hospital? So he drops me off at the steps of the hospital on Sunset Boulevard, and I walk up the steps with my little bag, and he waves at me, and he goes off to have this meeting. And he comes back, and he said, they were all there. They liked it. They're going to buy it. And he's looped.
Wow.
They've all been having...
Yeah.
But he's upright and so on, and he finally said, oh, a bed. And he collapsed off the foot of my bed and went to sleep. And I'm laughing.
Yeah.
I'm laughing. We have that kind of a family, you know. So he woke up about 10 minutes later, and he said, so how are you doing? Oh my gosh. Is it, you know, I said, cool down. Nothing's happened yet. And I delivered my second child in the morning at 4:00 in the morning, and he had slept through the whole thing.
Oh, man.
But he was so excited and Disney bought it, and it's in their archives.
Yeah, I want to see that. I've got a DVD of the opening day, but you're saying this is like a making of the opening day.
Yes.
I don't think that's ever been released.
I don't think so
I would
either.
love to see that. If you find it when you're going through your stuff, you let me know.
I think Archives gave me a copy of it.
Oh, well then really let me know if you find a copy. I would love to see that.
I'm not sure.
That's interesting. So crazy connections with Disneyland Park even from this character of Tinkerbell. Of course, she's lived on many, many years. When they did the 50th anniversary DVD, they flew you to London for a cool press event.
Catherine and I
I love it. I want to know, because I know you had, I read about how they transformed a home there into the Darling residence for the press.
Was that something?
That's really cool.
It was. But the interesting part about it was they had 24 hours to put it together and 24 hours to take it down.
Oof.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, the same 24 hours.
That's crazy.
It was.
Yeah.
It was absolutely crazy. They had the nursery on the 3rd floor. They had the rooms on the 2nd floor where you could rest. On the 1st floor, you've seen these buildings in London from pictures where it looks like one great big huge building, but there are doors all the way through.
Yeah.
Well, one of those that they took for the Darling house, and I talked to the press in the dining room, and Catherine talked to them in the living room, and we had serving wenches all dressed up in, but they could not get me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That was just awful.
Oh, no. That's just such a cool press event. And then later on, you actually got to fly in a helicopter over London and the same pattern that Peter Pan did with the children.
Twice we got to do it. Now, here's something about the movie itself. One of the things that we did, they opened up a very famous cinema that had closed down for who knows what reasons, and dressed it up and invited a whole bunch of people. I would imagine there were maybe 400 people that could sit in the cinema. And Catherine and I went on stage and talked back and forth just briefly to the audience. A whole bunch of little kids, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I hope this won't fall flat on its face, because I know the parents will laugh at them, but it's England, again. So we sat there with them, and I'm peeking around I never heard such laughter in my life. And when I tell people, do you remember how funny the movie is? And they look at me, I said, it's one laugh after another. Those people and the little 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds got it. Particularly the scenes between Smee and Captain Hook. Sure. And I'm so thrilled that their reaction was the same as I react to the movie. Not very long ago, I was called up by somebody over in England to do an interview on film, because they were getting together the top 100 films that were ever shown, family films that were ever shown. And
was like an AFI list, one of those AFI top 100s?
That could be. And of course, I led into Peter Pan. And that was this, as I said, we don't think anything about that. Peter Pan sits over, it's going to be on the top list. Isn't that lovely?
That's crazy.
Now, again, I could have been, and I'm not putting this down, I could have been the live action actress for, let's pick one of the Disney movies that is not really iconic, but wonderful. And they would remember that. Sure. Yeah. But not like Tinkerbell.
No, Tinkerbell's lived on. And anything else you want to add about Tinkerbell or Peter Pan before we get into your latest project?
I am utterly fascinated with artists who can take Tinkerbell, who has such really, I would say, severe lines. That's what Marc called them. They always have to be this, or you wouldn't know it was Tinkerbell. For example, she has a flat head. And then her bangs, but so many artists don't notice that.
Okay.
I didn't until he told me about it. That they could take her and move her into so many different things and put different clothes on her or all the rest. And you always know exactly who it is. Yeah. She comes through like that. And I don't know, I don't like to brag. I like other people to tell me how wonderful I am. I mean, that's cool. But I think I have a lot to do with that, because the walk, everything, and you see they're used. And one of my favorite ones that I just got, an artist over at Disney loves airplanes the way that I do. And just for the fun of it, he had done the nose of a B-17, because my second husband was an aircraft commander in World War II, and he flew those, and B-29. And you know the iconic picture of Betty Grable as the pinup girl with her back and looking over her shoulder.
Yeah.
He drew Tinkerbell.
Oh, that's funny.
And I love it. It's one of my favorites.
That's funny.
But you knew it was Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
You always know who she is.
Yeah.
And I just bless people who love her and enjoy her, and they tell me that their kids just adore her. The D23 that we were just at, I must have had 20 people tell me they're doing or have done their their room over as Tinkerbell.
Oh, that's cool.
How long? 67, 68 years ago?
Yeah. And she's still flying over the castle in the parks. It's unbelievable. Well, tell me a little bit about your project. You have your flyer here. They all look alike to me. What is this about?
Well, all my life I have had difficulty remembering people's faces. And of course, you don't mention that to anybody. Even from the way back when I was working in our gang, I could learn the lines. I could do that beautifully. But I'd walk off the set and come back later and forget who was the director. What does he look like? So all my life, everyone looked like everyone else, and it was difficult, very difficult. And you can imagine meeting all the people that I do. I will back down and tell you a quick little story before I tell you about this one. I had to come up with something because people would come up to me, loving people, give me a hug and say, "You remember me? I talked to you at the last D23. We talked for about 5 minutes."
I just did this to you when you came here today.
Right.
We'd met somewhere.
So I had to do something. So I came up with this one, and I looked at them, and I smile, and they always have this expectant look on their face, like, "You do remember, don't you?"
Sure.
And I look at them and I say, "You know, I think you were wearing a different color shirt." And that's what I get is laughter. It breaks up everything, and we talk. And if I get a chance to tell them, I have walked by my husband twice at an airport.
Wow.
I didn't expect him there. And you know, it was, Marg, you know, and that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So, I guess about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I picked up an article that talked about a woman who has prosopagnosia, it's called. She has it severely. She doesn't recognize her own children.
Wow.
I mean, that's severe. I'm not there at all. I just have tried so hard for so long, and I felt so awful at doing it, but now there's a name for it. So I want to get the word out there about face blindness. Go on your computers and just look under face blind. Wikipedia does a great job. There's another one that's just face blind, and it's very short to read it. Brad Pitt has it. Jane Goodall or it's reported anyway, Jane Goodall with the gorillas. It's reported. And it's definite that Governor Hickenlooper of Colorado has it. He announced it on CNN.
Wow.
Well, it turns out that I'm telling somebody about this, and my best friend is standing behind me, and she said, "What was that?" And I told her again that I walked right by I did recognize my daughter at a party because I didn't think she was going to be there at all. She said, "I have that. My best friend has it. 1 in 50 people. That's a bunch of people."
Yeah. Huh.
Now, I'm going to tell why this is important, and I'll do it as fast as I can.
You have all the time you want.
Okay. But it sounds like I'm lecturing, but if you don't understand, so you say, "So why is this serious?" Well, let's say my brother was misdiagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he's killed himself. Because nobody knew about face blindness. But now that I know what it is, he had exactly the same thing that I had. But he came to it another way. He wouldn't go out and meet anybody. So he had no way of answering any of the questions they have, would not turn on the television, etc., etc. So you have somebody, an older person, who goes to a convalescent hospital and does not recognize the different nurses that come in and start talking. And this goes on for maybe 3 weeks. And what do they put down in the list? They say, maybe dementia. Can't remember. And it has nothing to do with that. Now, it might be that they can't remember, but it also might be prosopagnosia. So you take it into consideration. But the second one is much worse. You're a little kid. You see people the way you see people. You don't know people see other people. You were sent off to school. 28 strangers in the room. And I was told this story by a lady about a little boy, and I guess he was 5 or 6. I never got that he ran screaming from his classroom down the hallway at his school, just screaming, terrified. And they finally settled him down. It took them a long, long time. And after talking to them a long time, they figured out he had the kind that I have. If I know you long enough, I can recognize you. And if I expect you to be something around the animation business, I'm okay.
Sure.
All right. But it was a substitute teacher, and you know what he got out of that? I'm in the wrong room. I'm completely lost. My mommy and daddy will never find me again.
Yeah.
So that, I want people to know, take it into consideration. And I'm suspecting that there are children who have been thought to have all these different things that they say children have, and antisocial is one of them, that what they have is prosopagnosia or face blindness. Just take it into consideration.
So this is something you're born with. This isn't like a gradual thing.
Most of the time. Yeah. Most of the time. So I just want the word to get out there. I have written this pamphlet, and it's 4 short stories of one that happened with my husband, one that happened on the set of If You Knew Susie and The Little Rascals, and one that happened at the Tam O'Shanter at Walt Disney's favorite table. Yeah. And the people that I talked to all evening long, and my husband was talking to all evening long at the next table, and we went out and got our cars at separate times, but we were standing there talking to turned out to be my next door neighbors.
Oh, geez.
I did not recognize them.
Is this something, are you going to be posting this pamphlet on your website or anything?
I never thought of that.
You should do that.
What a good idea.
Tinkerbelltalks.com is the place. And it's a fairly small pamphlet we got here, so you can certainly...
And there's pictures, all kinds of pictures in it.
And I love the cover is the characters of Peter Pan,
and
including
guess who
Tinkerbell,
did that?
with no face. My guess is that's the work of Rick Law.
Yes, bless his heart.
Former Disney Coast to Coast guest. But yeah, so I would definitely scan this and put this on your website.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
But it explains why, and you never say to somebody, I have face blindness. You know why?
Why is that?
They'll break up laughing. They think that's a punchline.
Oh.
They will. So I stand there and say, I have a prosopagnosia. And that's easy for me to say. And they stop. That stops them.
Yeah.
And I said, no, actually it's called face blindness. And it's serious.
Yeah.
And they go, okay. But if you walk up and said, I didn't recognize you, you recognize me. I said, no, I have face blindness. Oh, but it's important. It's like dyslexia. Mm-hmm. You still have it, but you know what it is.
Sure. It's got a label, and you're not the only one.
You don't know,
which makes a world of difference.
You don't know how many people I've told this to, and the eyes get bigger, the eyebrows go up, and said, I've had that all my life. I'll tell you who has it. He makes the animatronic...
Oh, Garner Holt.
Garner Holt. I dropped this in front of him the last time I saw him at a meeting at his place. He says, I have that. He said, I got 2 of my employees mixed up all the time.
Interesting.
I mean, out of the blue.
Yeah.
And it's like... And you have a hallelujah moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for letting me tell that.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. These are some great stories, folks. The website is tinkerbelltalks.com. The name of the book is Tinkerbell Talks, Tales of a Pixie-Dusted Life.
Yes,
Margaret?
And one thing I'd like to say about the book. It's lengthy, but I wrote it like a Reader's Digest.
Read. Yeah.
Because I'm an entertainer. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. So there are 80 stories in it, and every chapter is a story. The longest chapter is 8 pages long. Mm-hmm. The shortest chapter is 1 page long.
Yeah.
So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you can pick it up, read a chapter, and put it down. It's not a continuation. It's just great fun. And I wanted everybody to be entertained and could sit back. And I call it my Reader's Digest.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Margaret, for coming on the show. This has been great.
Oh, they can get it on Amazon.
Amazon.com and tinkerbelltalks.com.
Yes.
Perfect.
Right. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I hope you all enjoyed that interview with Margaret, and I would once again like to thank Margaret for taking the time to come on the show. Now, before we get going, I want to remind all of you that Disney Coast to Coast is currently involved with a huge contest that's going on where you could win a trip to Walt Disney World. So be sure to visit DisneyCoastToCoast.com and click on Contest. You can enter every day now through the end of September. While you're at DisneyCoastToCoast.com, be sure to click on Free Gift, where you can get your list of America's Hidden Mickeys featuring lesser-known Disney destinations around the USA. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.